Just like we all predicted, the domino effect of Nick Saban's retirement at Alabama is creating chaos in the world of college football. And not just in coaching circuits, it's also doing it when it comes to the transfer portal. Less than a week removed from losing to Michigan in the national championship, Washington was on a coaching search because Kalen DeBoer was named Saban's heir apparent down in Tuscaloosa. Meanwhile, the feel-good story of 2023, Arizona, is now going back to square one as their head coach, Jedd Fisch, is head of the Pacific Northwest to join the Huskies as DeBoer's replacement. And Arizona has a roster good enough to win the Big 12 and be a legit contender for a college football playoff berth if they can retain talent. And that starts by bringing in the right head coach. So who are the top candidates to replace Fisch, and what candidates actually really fit the bill down in Tucson? Let's go ahead and talk about that. But if you are new here, well, welcome on into the channel, people. My name is Cole Thompson. I'm a radio show host based in Houston, and I talk college football daily. Look, the season may be over. The clock may have struck midnight on 2023, but we're not stopping doing content here. We got live shows starting this week. We got a banner added in. We'll be recapping 2023, a look ahead at 2024. Transfer portal is going to be running rampant. We still got coaching searches galore. So if this is the type of fix you need to survive a Saturday without college football, make sure you smash that subscribe button down below. Tell me who your top replacement is for Jedd Fisch down for Bear Down Country. Tell your friends, your family, your mortal enemies, your best of bros, Wildcat fans, and college football aficionados everywhere about this channel, because we are on the race to become the #1 YouTube show talking college football daily. Continue to follow me on social media. I call it Twitter. You call it X. We all call it Instagram, at Mr. Cole Thompson. That way, conversations surrounding our favorite sport never have to stop flowing. Jedd Fisch was a very good coach, and Jedd Fisch did wonders down in Tucson. Things that I don't even think the Wildcat faithful thought was going to be possible this year. And Vegas certainly didn't. Did anybody see the over-under win total when the year began? 5.5? Yeah. And then you lose your starting quarterback in the process with Jayden de Laura. And Noah Fafita comes in and actually outplays him and looks to be the long-term future. You find a #1 receiver into Territory McMillan. You have a very good year from Jacob Cowing. You like the way your offense is constructed, and you also have a good foundation defensively going into the Big 12 with players that you recruited, you handpicked. So Jedd Fisch did a lot of good for this roster moving forward, which is why his unharmonious exit is probably a sour feeling for a lot of Wildcat fans. But if you can keep as many players as possible on this roster, we have no idea what's going to happen in the next 30 days. Because remember, now that Fisch is gone and he left on his own terms, the window opens. 30 days from now, this Wildcat roster could look completely different. And there could be a lot of kids going up to Seattle. There could be a lot of kids going to other schools in the Big 10 or in the Big 12 or anywhere else. But you still have to field a team next year. So who are the top candidates? #1, I think, is a very obvious for anybody that knows the Wildcats. San Jose head coach Brett Brennan. 50 years old, former Arizona grad. He actually was in the running for the job back in 2020 after the Kevin Sumlin debacle, but he stick around. He has been coaching in one of the, I would say, strangest and hardest places to win. And he's kind of made a little bit of magic. 24-19 over the last 4 years. 2020 rolls around. They go 7-1. He becomes a top 25 head coach in terms of the AP poll. Offensively, they're very fundamentally sound. They always seem to be fighting new challenges, yet he masquerades his way through to get to bowl eligibility. And this is a guy that definitely understands what it means to be a Wildcat. Plain and simple. Former Arizona grad. Once you start to get that homegrown feeling, it's very hard to say that they're going to leave elsewhere. It would take a special job for you to depart your alma mater. Jonathan Smith is a perfect example of this. Not knowing what the future held in Corvallis ultimately led to him taking the job in East Lansing. He wasn't ready to probably go say goodbye to all of those with the Beavers, but when the future is unknown and you're trying to do what's best for you, you always got to go ahead and hit your wagon elsewhere. And even then, it still is a hard sell. So for a guy like Brett Brennan, who could end up being the long-term answer in Tucson simply because of his background, his relationship, it all depends on if he's ready for this next commitment. But if so, that's probably where most attention turns to right now. Kind of speaking a little bit about what I just said with Oregon State, that kind of leads to our next head coach, Jake Dickert from Washington State. He's good. He's very good. He absolutely understands offensive and defensive concepts. He's done a decent job recruiting out in the Pacific Northwest in the Pac-12, opposite of teams like Washington, like Oregon State. He was able to produce a quarterback that actually garnered a lot of garnered a lot of draft day 2 interest in Cam Ward. And even though the record says 15-16, I don't think a lot of people understand where this roster was during the Nick Rolovich situation. So when Rolovich got let go because of the COVID-19 debacle, they turned to Dickert. And Dickert brought this team from the brink of just complete and total disaster. He founded it his own laurels. He kind of built a strategy that made them at least somewhat successful. And they've been ranked on multiple occasions inside the top 25. And just like a guy like Jonathan Smith, you don't know what the future holds for you in Pullman. You think that right now that you'll at least be a player going up against Mountain West teams. You have a shot at beating a guy like Jedd Fisch in the Apple Cup every year. Those are things that potentially lead to you still being ranked and still in the conversation to make the college football playoff. But nothing is guaranteed. You know what is guaranteed? If you win the Big 12, you're going to the college football playoff. And so if Arizona continues to retain as much talent and they're able to still recruit at the level that they were and develop said talent the way that Fisch did, I think you're in a very good spot with a guy like Dickert. He absolutely has to be on the short list simply because with the unknowns of what is the Pac-2, maybe going to the Big 12 is exactly what you need for the Wildcats, especially if you're able to keep a similar concept that's involved. How about another group of 5 coach that doesn't get a lot of respect but should? Barry Odom at UNLV. So Odom's a guy that I think a lot of people would be tuned off by simply because of how his exit at Mizzou went. They didn't have a good season. They were expected to finish in the top 25. They completely unraveled. But you have to remember, he's really done a good job reinventing himself. Goes to Arkansas. He turns that defense around. This past season, he ends up getting the job at UNLV. And the Rebels, they go 9-5. That's their first winning season since 2000, second winning season since 2000. They had a competent offense, especially led by Brennan Marion, who I think would be an exceptional replacement for Odom if he were to take the job elsewhere in Sin City. They found a way to get a quarterback that now is going to be slinging it around the yard at USC. Maybe if Odom goes and maybe if Marion follows, they're able to convince him to come down to Arizona if Fafita were to leave. There's an expectation, and also from a defensive mindset, if you're able to retain as many of these defensive players that helped you post a top 40 finish, then I think that you're in very good hands. Defense and offense are going to really dictate the outcome for the Big 12. And I know that sounds kind of stupid the way that I phrased it, but let me explain. There will be teams that are heavy defensively sound, and then there will be teams that are heavily offensively driven. And those two are going to meet up for a spit-swapping 3-hour showdown on Saturdays, and we're really going to be able to have that conversation. What came first, the chicken or the egg? What wins games, offense or defense? A guy like Odom can get the best version of the defense, and he also knows the lay of the land in the Midwest, which does feature several teams that are going to be in your Big 12, that are going to be recruiting against you. And he also knows how to win at least a stable level. Wouldn't say an elite level, but there could be a few hires that were a little bit better. I don't think there's many more better than Barry Odom, if we're being completely honest. Next up, let's go with an OC just to mix things up a little bit here. Ryan Grubb. I know he took the job at Alabama. I get it. He right now is Alabama's OC. But like we said with Cam Ward not too long ago, you never say never in the world of college football. Until the ink is dry and the games begin and the expiration date has passed, I can promise you, everyone is made available. What's the one thing that really stood out about this Arizona offense this past year? It's passing attack. With Tatera McMillan, with what you have with Jacob Cowing, with Noah Fafita. And if you're able to retain any of that talent, it's going to be the same format. And now imagine that offensive concept that was developed by DeBoer and passed down to Grubb, that was eventually leading your team to an 11-2 finish and a 25-2 record over 2 years in Seattle, is now the offensive identity in the Big 12. And now McMillan is looking like the Fred Biletnikoff Award winner. And now Fafita is putting up numbers that's going to put him in New York City in early December. And certainly in the conversation for the Davey O'Brien Award, and certainly in the conversation for All-American status, and certainly in the conversation for Big 12 Player of the Year. All that can happen if you hire Grubb. And Grubb might be ready to release himself from the veins and the clutches of Kalen DeBoer. You probably hate Kalen DeBoer right now because he stole your head coach. technically by taking the job down in Tuscaloosa, but you may want one of his disciples if you're trying to keep as much offensive star power as possible from hitching their wagon alongside a guy like Jedd Fisch up in Seattle. Makes a lot of sense on paper. I think it would work absolutely extremely well from the jump. Even if it did take a year for you to win the Big 12, a guy like Grubb, he understands how to recruit, he understands how to build a roster, and he understands how to get the best out of his players, even if they aren't 5 stars. How about an up-and-comer? A guy that maybe you take a year early, he struggles, but he ends up being the best thing for you. That'd be JG Keen out in Texas State. GJ Keen was a superstar quarterback. I'm not sure many of you remember what he was able to do when he was in college, but then he got into coaching, and he's young, and he's been able to build a great relationship with a lot of young coaches and with a lot of veterans to where his name has been in small circles, primarily in Texas, but for opportunities that are going to open up in the not so distant future. Last year, led Texas State, 8-5 record, took them to their first bowl game and first bowl win, one of the best passing attacks in college football, headlined by TJ Finley at starting quarterback. And his offense is very creative. It's up-tempo. He was able to sustain that success after Eric Morris left Incarnate Word and he was promoted. And last season when he was at Incarnate Word, they finished 12-2 and were number 3 in the FCS rankings. So this is a guy that is still very young. He's very good friends with a quarterback that you guys know extremely well, Nick Foles. And maybe if he's able to implement that same concept, you won't keep everybody, and you certainly will take a step back this year. But you hire him a year early. He learns the ins and outs about what it takes to be successful at the collegiate level in a Power 5 program, and eventually he ends up leading you to a conference title. Here's the crazy part. You may want to make this hire because if you don't, a year from now, you could be facing off against him, and that is one of the worst things that you could possibly ever imagine. You always want to take talent. You don't want to be facing a lot of talent, and a guy like GJ King absolutely fits the bill. Another offensive coordinator, Will Stein. Stein's interesting because, right now he seems very content working alongside Dan Lanning, and Lanning hired him after you lost Kenny Dillingham, who Dillingham right now is calling the plays for your rival Arizona State. So when you look at the situation, it would be wash, rinse, repeat, steal from Oregon. Oregon has a good reason to. They were one of the best teams when it came to running the football this past year. You kind of struggled running the football. You ranked 80th in college football. If you look at a guy like Arizona, you look at a program like Oregon, they were number 7. So I think that you want to go ahead and hire that guy. Offensively, they were a top 20 unit. They were very sound when it came to offensive line play, when it came to quarterback, when it came to wide receivers. And he's been on the fast track, and this is not an uncommon thing. And by the way, the offense was working well before with Will Stein, even when he didn't have Bo Nix as his quarterback. Anybody know where he came from? UTSA. Anybody remember what UTSA did back-to-back years with Jeff Traylor and Will Stein, and Frank Harris was the starting quarterback? They kind of rewrote history down in the Alamo City, and they won 2 back-to-back Conference USA titles. I think that maybe, just like Keene, it's a year early, but you'd rather be a year early than a year late. Stein eventually is going to be running a program. Why not have him run your program when you know that there's a lot of foreseeable promise in the future? 2 more for you really fast. I think that this one's kind of a stretch only because I'm not sure where he resides in all of the madhouse, but I will say Brian Harsin, the former Boise State and Auburn head coach, is at least, in my opinion, going to be on a short list of, well, we don't want to go ahead and hire somebody from the outside and then ruin the other programs and then see all that. We just want to make a hire right now. He has experience in the Mountain West. He has experience on the West Coast. He does understand recruiting, and he was a proven winner during his time when he was at Boise State. I'm not saying that this is the hire that you want to make, but last season, there were rumors and speculation that Harsin could be on the short term when it came to other programs looking for him in a Pac-12 job, simply because he knew how to win and he knew the actual lay of the land a little bit better. So I could see where if this is the last resort kind of thing and everyone else is turning you down and you don't know what direction to turn and you want a veteran to lead your team into a new era of Wildcat football, you make a phone call to a guy that's currently unemployed and looking for his next destination. That's just my 2 cents on it. Last one, Toledo's head coach Jason Candle. He had been rumored to be in a lot of different markets this past offseason. He ends up leading the Rockets to an 11-1 regular season finish, and this has been a constant trend. I will say the one thing that does benefit a program like Toledo, others, is the abundance of resources found by the boosters. The Rockets are one of the best teams and one of the most well-funded teams in the action. So if you think that your funding is going to be a problem, he may not want to take the job. It's a little bit like Jamie Chadwell. There's programs out there that are group of 5 schools that can offer a ton of resources and money simply because of what they have from boosters backing, and they can turn down really prominent jobs. But Matt Campbell was a guy that a lot of people thought was eventually going to make it to the NFL. And a lot of people thought that Jason Candle was going to be his replacement at Iowa State. Jason Candle interviewed for the job in Indiana. He was in the running for the job at Duke. He was in the running for a job at a lot of different places. Maybe this is finally his home that he wants to be. I don't think he ends up getting the job, but you never say never in the world of college football. And Candle honestly would be a very qualified candidate after the recent success, early success, and how to reinvent himself during his time in Toledo over the last 8 years. But there you go. Those are my top coaches that I think are going to be in the running, and I think one of them will end up getting the job at Arizona. I think Arizona is a very bright team. I think that with NIL, and especially with what the Big 12 is, if you can retain talent, you always have a shot to win. But Brett Brennan is probably going to be the number one answer from San Jose State. I think you're also going to have to throw in Washington State's Jake Dickert, UNLV's Barry Odom, Texas State's G.J. Keane. I would throw in Oregon offense coordinator Will Stein, Washington, now Alabama offense coordinator Ryan Grubb, Toledo head coach Jason Campbell, and last but not least, I would have to say Brian Harsin. If all things fall apart, at least you know you're getting a coach with veteran experience. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching that video. Don't hit the X button yet. Make sure you hit subscribe to keep up with all of our daily content found on Just Saying It and anything else that we post on this channel. Bye.